get to the main presentation, I want to introduce Fred. Fred, please start your camera and your microphone. Fred is the owner and president of Gray Systems. Fred has been in the continuing education industry since the mid-70s when he started his career as an educator in real estate, serving as a national speaker for the NAR. And as an educator, he also became involved in community association management education before it even became a law. This guy wrote the book. So for those of you who don't know him, this is one of the people responsible for what we have today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Fred Gray. Fred, the floor.
Thank you, Jeff.
Is yours.
And welcome to everyone today for our roundtable discussion. One question we have already received and I addressed, this does not count for continuing education. This is only a 1-hour segment. We will have a program offered shortly, which will be a full 3-hour segment on disaster preparation, more focused on all types of emergencies rather than just hurricanes. Our discussion today is going to be related to the hurricane preparedness and recovery as well. As Jeff said, we treat this kind of like an open discussion. If you do have questions or comments, please raise your hand. Jeff will call on you when it's appropriate. At the end, we will have a question and answer session. Those of you who've been in programs with me before, I'm open to anything. Once we cover what I'm supposed to talk about here, my little outline, I'll talk about anything that you want to. Some of you did submit questions with your registration. I will address those as we go through as well and talk about that, part of that process. And my whole objective with education is to give you what you need, not what I want to say. For your benefit is hopefully it's something you take with you and utilize as well. To start that program, I'm going to share my screen and use some slides up here in my PowerPoint presentation.
Fred, while you're doing that, I just want to interject 2 quick things. Tomorrow we'll be sending out a follow-up email to everybody that's here, okay? And in that follow-up email will be the slides that you're seeing today. So this way it's something you don't have to ask as we go forward. We will have a link for the slides in the email that you will all get tomorrow. And also, a lot of you registered over the last couple of days. So if you registered over the last couple of days, we may not have your questions that Fred has. Fred may not have your questions ahead of time. So feel free when we get to the Q&A session, if you registered within the last couple of days and you don't hear your question addressed already, please raise your hand, type it in, and we'll try to get to everything as quickly as we can today. Fred, back to you, sir.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, good point. Getting started here, before we get down to the specifics here, I always like to take a moment and talk about the concept of management. All of us are managers in some shape, form, or fashion, and sometimes we forget about what we're supposed to be doing, and I always like to give this as a reminder. I do this for myself quite frequently as well, and remind myself what I'm supposed to be doing as a manager. But the management process is defined by an acronym called PODC. I learned it as PODC. Over the years, the C has become a little bit L leading as well. But anyway, that's the acronym that I learned a long, long time ago. And I didn't make this up. This came from much smarter people than me. Primarily a guy named Peter Drucker, who's the father of the business management, modern management principles. And his acronym was planning, organizing, directing, controlling, and leading. Those are the activities of management that we apply to all of our management goals and objectives. As a manager, we're supposed to put together a plan that achieves our organization's objectives, organize the activities necessary to achieve those goals, and then direct control the activities of our resources to accomplish that. This acronym, management acronym, has very applicable application to the preparation for disasters. I have a bigger course called disaster preparation. This is going to be focused on hurricanes because that's the immediate issue that we face in Florida. We all have been through this. If you haven't been, you will at some point in time. And it's kind of interesting to note that the hurricane issue has changed over the years. I grew up in Florida, and all my years of living in Florida from the 1940s to today, wasn't until 2004 that I actually experienced a full-fledged hurricane. I lived in North Central Florida, north of Florida originally, then came to Central Florida. And over the years, we had experienced the trailing ends of hurricanes, winds and rain, but never a full-blown hurricane. In 2004, we had 5 named storms hit Central Florida, right where I live in the middle of the state. And that became something frequently. We've since experienced several more right over us as well. So it's not something that we can ignore. It's something that's going to happen to all of us. And we've had some serious hurricanes recently. 2017, we had Irma. 2018, we had Michael. There was one on the East Coast as well. So it's something we need to recognize is going to happen and put this process in place to be ready for it, for both from the front end and on the back end. And as a manager, that's our management goals and objectives: planning, organizing, directing, controlling, and leading those activities necessary to put that plan in place. And I say that more as a reminder for myself and for all the rest of us out there as well, and recognizing what we're doing as a manager. That's one of the goals and objectives of our profession as a manager as well. Also, we have to recognize what we're working with here. In most cases, we're working with a community association, whether it's a condominium, cooperative, or an HOA. The community association concept evolves around the association providing goods and services for the benefit of the members. The association is managed by a board. All of our associations are incorporated. Corporate law requires that we have a board of directors. The board of directors are selected or elected by the membership at an annual meeting each year, or by appointment if there are vacancies, whatever it might be. And the board is the body charged with the duty, the authority, the responsibility to manage the affairs of the corporation for the benefit of the members and the owners. So it's the board's ultimate responsibility to do what's necessary to take care of the property, maintain the property, operate the association for everybody's benefit. Obviously, the members have to pay for this. They do that through the assessment process. We call it an assessment. That's a technical term. You may have heard it referred to as maintenance fees, membership fees, dues, whatever. But that's the responsibility of the board, and the board and or management collectively do what's necessary to operate the association and maintain the common property. Maintain the common property also means protect the common property. That means we're prepared for the disasters such as a hurricane, put plans and processes in place to be ready for that, and also be able to react to it, and then to recover from it as well. That's the option that we have right there as well. Also, let me mention something real quickly here about management. As we're all aware, sometimes we have to be reminded, there is no requirement that any association in Florida engage professional management. The engagement of professional management is an option, not a requirement. If the board does decide to engage professional management to assist it in carrying out its duties and responsibilities, the board is still ultimately responsible for the affairs of the corporation. As managers, we do not tell the board what to do. We advise the board. We try to assist the board. Sometimes we try to nudge them in what we think is the right direction, but we can't tell the board what to do. And I've seen some situations where some management entities have tried to control that, take control of the board away from take control of the association away from the board. That's not a proper relationship that we should be working with there as well. So the board is the body that's responsible for managing the affairs of the corporation. As management, we work under their direction and control. And we're doing this for the benefit of the members and the owners. And I like to relate this to a government. Even though some of my friends in the legal profession cringe when I say that. It's not a government per se, but it functions like a government for our association itself. Our board's like a city commission or a county commission or the state legislature, whatever it might be, and they function in that regard as well. So it's important to recognize the relationship when we're putting together all of our management concerns, activities, and our programs as well. And I say all that kind of as a reminder. I know from my personal experience, sometimes I get lost in my little nuances and forget the big picture here. And occasionally I have to pull out my book and go back and read the PODC directions again as well. I still have my Principles of Management book from college, Peter Drucker wrote, and that was over 40 something years ago, but I still have to be reminded about that as well. And that's what I like to do in these discussions, to just kind of give us a reminder.
Yeah, and you could be the brightest, smartest, most highest IQ manager there is, but a very, very important factor as well is to have a personality that meshes with the board, correct?
Very, 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 very critical. And as managers, we have to be somewhat of a chameleon. As a lizard, we got to go with the flow. And it's kind of like we don't want to upset anybody, the board or the members. And we have to be kind of nice to everybody. But very critical. We don't want to be demanding. We don't want to be pushy. We want to try to assert as much as we can our management experience in assisting the board. Remember, we're assisting, we're not directing. That's our job as managers. I have a friend, good friend that I've known for many, many years. When he was in college, he majored in governmental operations. He wanted to be basically a city manager, a county manager, and he achieved that goal. And in his career, I like to tell the story, he wound up managing our county, where I live, Lake County. And shortly after he took the job and got settled in, we made contact and we arranged to get together for a social evening, catch up on everything. And we were having dinner, his wife and my wife and I, and he, and we were discussing everything. And I said, well, we're glad to have you in Lake County. He said, that's great. I'm love to be here. He said, I'll probably be here 4 or 5 years. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, that's about how long we last. It's about 5 years. In 4 or 5 years, they're going to change the city commission or the county commission. They're going to want to go in a different direction. And I'll say, fine, I'll go somewhere else. He said, that's what I've seen throughout my career. And that's not unheard of. However, there are situations where management stays in place for many years. I've observed in this profession, there are a lot of people that have been in one location for many, many years. That's because they have a very stable community, have a very stable population. They have good people that run for the board. I'm not saying there are bad people out there, but sometimes we get people with an agenda that kind of throw everything off and create issues and problems. We don't want to talk about that too much today, but that is a problem. And Jeff's observation is very right on point, that we do have to be somewhat of adjusting personalities to make sure that everything meshes and we're going in the right direction. And I mention all that because that's all critical to achieving the association goals and objectives. There's one other issue that I want to talk about here real quickly. I didn't mention it in my PODC, but a lot of the people that study management in recent years have added a fifth step in this process of management called evaluating. A manager should periodically go back and evaluate their success in achieving those goals and objectives they have established in conjunction with the board. Obviously, we're not going to do anything without the board's direction and approval, but evaluation is very critical to go back and see if we've done our job properly and correctly. And I'd like to mention also, in this profession, it's very difficult to get a solid evaluation. Normally, you find that if you're in a business world, I'm a businessman, I have a company, I have a measuring stick to see if I feel like I've done a good job. Part of that is, are my customers happy, satisfied? Are my employees happy? Am I contributing to society from what I feel is good? Also, I have a profit measure that I can use to see whether I'm successful in business as well. In the community association world, we don't have that measuring stick. We have the people part, we have the management part, but we don't have that profit objective. As a matter of fact, our success is measured by spending less money. The less money we spend to achieve the objectives, the better off we are. So it's very difficult sometimes to get that evaluation factor. Sometimes we have to go ask for it. We have to go to the board and say, am I doing a good job? Or the things that we need to do better. Do evaluations. Sometimes we can do surveys. One problem with surveys is the only people that, I'll say this not correctly, but erroneously, I was going to say the only people who respond to surveys are people who aren't happy. That's not necessarily true, but typically people don't respond to surveys unless they have a problem or an issue. So surveys usually aren't very effective in evaluating how well we did. And a lot of people want to bring this up in live presentations and say, how do you evaluate? And they say, nobody complains. If nobody's complaining, that means I did a good job.
Well, it's funny because I hear a lot, and we'd love to hear from you guys as well. Type in your comments after we finish this particular comment. Um, I often get a lot of managers or board members telling me, I wish more people would come to the board meetings. No, we only get the same 15 to 20 people coming to our board meetings. Well, I've always told them, as being in the business as well for a long time, if you have a lot of people coming to your board meetings, it's probably something they're not happy about. So be careful what you ask for, because the sense of having the regular attendance usually means you're doing a lot of things correctly. And we just got a question here, which is on topic, Fred. And it's from an anonymous attendee, so we don't have a name, but good dialogue on working with the board. What would be a red line when a CAM should walk away from a board that is violating statutes so as to not jeopardize his or her license? What's your opinion on that? Like, when should they draw that line in the sand saying, screw this, I'm out of here?
I'm going to give my opinion.
Yeah.
Straight ahead, Jeff. Also, I want to reiterate, we didn't say it very loudly at the beginning of our program. This is not legal. This is not legal advice. I'm an educator, but I do have a broad experience with this as well. And there is a red line. I'm not sure what it is. You have to make your own red line. If the board is doing something, my experience, okay, I've not done this from a management perspective. I've been on boards where I've seen this happen, where the board collectively decides they're going to do something that I, as a board member, don't agree with. In one case, I felt that it was contrary to the documents and the statute of the association, the condominium association that I was on the board of, and they did it anyway. I resigned from the board and expressed my concerns about the issue. I've talked to a lot of managers who called me or discussed this with me before about that issue as well. And my feeling is if the board's going to do something that you can obviously say that is not proper, is totally against their documents, against the statute, against the Florida Administrative Code, they're going to do it anyway, I would make my feelings known. And I think I would try to disassociate myself from that situation.
Document everything. I would say document everything, keep a record so that if anything does come around and bite you, and you have written documentation of the steps you've taken to try and do the right thing, right?
Correct. And you might want to make a memo. I have a file I started when I first left the public accounting world, went to work for a company in Orlando. And I went to a management seminar somewhere. Fortunately, my company that I was very strong on management and education. And they said, when you find yourself in a situation you don't agree with, make your feelings known, make a memo to file, and keep your file for yourself, and date it, document it, whatever, and keep it into a file. It used to be a file folder. Now it's probably a computer file somewhere. Also, you might want to circulate that written concern to the board and say that I'm not in agreement with this or whatever. Obviously, when you do that, you sometimes are placing yourself in jeopardy as well. So you have to be
of the job, not necessarily of your license. This person was concerned about losing the license, but if you're doing everything properly, not violating any laws, and advising the board that you're not in agreement because this is what it says in your documents and this is what your attorney says, it's unlikely you're going to jeopardize your license.
That would be true, Jeff, and I agree with that. If you've advised the board what your feelings are, and they say we're going to do it anyway, and in your opinion, that is a violation of whatever the document, statute, code, whatever it might be, that doesn't jeopardize you or your license. If you are a willing participant and supportive of that issue, then you're in jeopardy as well. Now, I want to say something here. I don't like to say it, but this is the real world. First of all, there are no community association police riding around checking up on what everybody's doing. In this world, it's based on a complaint. A complaint has to be filed with the DBPR. for issues with condominiums cooperatives. There is no regulator for HOAs. So if it's a condo or cooperative, if there's going to be some sort of disciplinary action, it's going to come from a complaint filed with the DBPR against the board. The board then is subject to discipline by the DBPR. They could even be fined and removed from the board, though that's very rare. It does happen. The issue with the manager is a manager is subject to a much broader complaint problem. A manager can have complaints filed by the individual owners, by the board. And so we're much more susceptible to complaints as well. Let me mention something about that as well. Of all the professions, from the latest study that I saw, of all the professions that are regulated within the Department of Business and Professional Regulation, our profession, community association management profession, has the least amount of disciplinary actions taken on a pro rata basis of any other profession.
Wow. Wow. That's intense.
It is. There are large numbers of complaints, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Complaints are very frequent, but most of them are found to be ungrounded, not supported by evidence, maybe personal issues, things like that. But we have the lowest number of actual disciplinary actions on a pro rata basis.
I didn't realize that. And for those of you wondering, yes, this is about hurricanes, but the reason we're addressing all of this is that you have to have the right types of personalities. You have to be able to work with your board in order to get these policies, procedures, and emergency action lists produced. You have to have the cooperation. So we're going to move on to get closer to our topic, but two quick statements here before we move on. One person wrote out, I'm having the same problem with violations of rules and statutes, not just that, but they do it anyway, even though they've been advised. So as Fred said, to start documenting everything, make sure you have a record that you're advising them that it's not the right thing. And another person just wrote in saying, I put this in the minutes that certain actions are against the manager's advice. So that's another way to document and record some of these items. But Fred, go ahead, back to the presentation. I just wanted to.
Those are excellent points, excellent observations, and I suggest that you do anything you can to document that. And by the way, this subject comes up in almost all of our discussions in classes, whatever. It's a chronic problem.
Right.
As I said, document it, and you have to use your own personal judgment about when we cross that line. So enough about that. And when you're putting your process together to plan for an emergency, whether it's a hurricane or otherwise, we're going to basically look at what we're dealing with here and the management planning process. First thing we want to do is analyze our property location. What are we susceptible to? Obviously, if you're in Florida, just about anywhere, we're susceptible to hurricanes. So we're going to put that into our planning process. Also, are there any laws and ordinances that we have to comply with and planning for this? Also, we want to utilize our facilities, our resources available to us, our local governments. We're going to give you some websites at the end here today, which now have tremendous information about preparation for hurricanes.
Not a bad idea to get to know your local, like go to functions, go to Chamber of Commerce meetings, go to different civic organizational meetings where some of your local politicians will be, because it's never a bad idea to get to know them a little bit. If you need to call in a little assistance for a disaster down the road, like maybe you need FEMA and you can't reach FEMA, and maybe your local representative, who you now have a better relationship with, can help you get somebody in there to help you clean up those trees.
Good point, Jeff. And something I'll touch on later, but it's a very good point. I always say, if you can, participate in local government, participate in the elections, go to council meetings, commission meetings, make yourself known. Also deal with your local building department, get those people on board. Also, we can talk about later, you've utilized contractors, your vendors, keep those people on your side, be friends with them. There'll be great resources when the time comes in an emergency for cleanup, whatever it might be. Also, the management planning process requires us to organize a team to get ready for the hurricane, in our case, also to recover from the hurricane. So we're going to talk about that in a few minutes, the team building and specifying duties and responsibilities. You're also going to analyze your physical property, whether you're a condominium or co-op, what properties is the association responsible for protecting, getting ready, detailing all that. We're going to talk about that in more detail in a moment as well. Also in the HOA world, the HOA may have very limited common property, not a lot of responsibility there. So we want to make sure that we communicate with our residents and give them tips about getting ready for hurricanes as they affect their individual homes or their buildings, whatever it might be as well. We also want to put a plan in place to protect our records. We're going to talk a bit more about that later on. Identify what records need to be protected. Obviously, the official records. You should have a list of those. If you don't have a copy of the statute, all three statutes, condo, co-op, and HOA, have a specified list of official records that are supposed to be maintained. Most of us maintain those records now digitally. That's perfectly okay, as long as you can produce a hard copy upon request from an owner, but we can request those digitally. And one of the things I like to mention too is if you have one of these things called a thumb drive, keep a pocket full of these around, keep everything that you have on a thumb drive and take it with you wherever you go. You might also want to make copies and put them into a safe environment, some sort of safe or safety deposit box, whatever it might be. Also planning for emergency equipment, you have to address that as well. So that's kind of putting the ideas together, what we're going to address in the planning process. Information that you need to have on hand, planning for the hurricane or other disaster. You need some information on your residents. Some of you are dealing with full-time residents. You know everybody. Smaller communities, you know everybody. Larger communities, you may not have information, but you want as much information as you can, recognizing you've got obviously the owner information. You also have the rosters. We also have contact information that we have to maintain. The notices, where we provide notices, their mailing address, which something good was changed this year is going to change. They're going to change the requirement that we provide notices to the address on record with the county property appraiser and go back to our records as well, which I thought was a big mistake when they did that a few years ago. But also maintain that kind of information. A resident profile, know that. You've got a log of all your residents. Also, if you have children in your community, make preparations for dealing with children. Also, older residents. If you have older residents, you want to identify issues with them and assisting them to an evacuation situation like that. Also, residents with possible disabilities. Gather that information as well, put it together so that you can have that at your fingertips if something does happen when you're trying to prepare for the hurricane and what you're going to do with the residents. Your property itself, you need to identify the construction of your property. What kind of property, what kind of building is it? Concrete, stucco, frame, steel and stucco, whatever it might be. Those are the kind of things you need to have if you have damage, whatever. Also, if you have plans and specifications for your building, particularly condominiums or co-ops that you may have from the beginning, make sure you safeguard those and have those available for reconstruction and coming back to the problems as well. Also, your emergency information as well. Make sure that you have all that as far as the property. You want things like your construction materials, fire hazards, your fire protection equipment, your emergency equipment, where all those things are, your emergency information, that would be your evacuation points. Where do we get out of here? How do we get out? All those kind of things. Also, any shelters you may have. Also identify all your shutoffs, your power shutoffs, water shutoff, all those things as well. Your evacuation plan. Obviously, if you have a multi-story building, you do have evacuation plans in place. Also provide for your elevator operation. Some of you have generators to operate the elevators. If you have five stories or more, you have to have a generator that can be operated for at least the generator itself to operate the elevator for at least 5 days after the storm as well. And make sure you have all that in place as well. And identifying the physical aspects of the property, a big part of the planning process. And I can't say how important planning is. And the planning part is getting ready. We don't want to wait until it's on top of us. We want to have all this ready as well. And you should have this information maintained constantly as part of your records of your association. Then you want to identify how you're going to respond. Your staff and emergency response team. Sometimes we don't think about it called an emergency response team. We need to have a team that's going to respond after the emergency, put a plan in place, identify your members. Your members may be you. A smaller association may only have one manager per se. That's your team, you're it. But identify yourself. But then from yourself, now identify those who are going to assist you. Your contractors, your suppliers, talk to your emergency response people in your city, your county. How do I get in touch with those people as well? Create an organizational chart. Who's in charge? The manager, then down all the way down. Obviously, the board's an ultimate responsibility, but they've got to be there as well. But quite often, many of you managing associations where the board members are snowbirds. We saw this back in 2004, 2005. The first hurricane in 2004 hit in August, and then another one, two in September and one in October.
Yeah.
Snowbirds weren't here. So there's nobody to respond but the manager. So have that responsibility chart there as well. Also, I want to remind you that we have in all three of our statutes, the condominium co-op and HOA, a section called the board's emergency powers section. In the event of a natural disaster where there's been a state of emergency declared, the board then can delegate to anybody that it needs to the duties and responsibilities to respond to whatever needs to be done. That was originally designed for hurricanes. When you read that law, it all directs itself to do what to do in the event of a hurricane, how to respond to damage, working with local government officials, all of those various things as well. They have a bill in the legislature right now that's probably going to pass. We never know, but it's probably going to pass that extends that emergency powers and clarifies that it applies to non-hurricane events, specifically like COVID-19. When COVID-19, the emergency was recognized last year, a little over a year ago in March, I think it was the first week of March, when the governor invoked the first state of emergency, the department issued a statement saying that they felt that those sections of the Condominium Act, Cooperative Act, and the HOA statute did apply in this situation. Now that was stretching it a little bit in a lot of people's opinion, but nobody complained. Because that gave the board and the association a lot of latitude in how we conduct meetings. We started doing virtual meetings, those kind of things as well, even though that was not technically covered in that statute. A lot of people gave a lot of latitude with that. I know we did some comments about that, some programs on that as well. Some of you participated in our previous programs on how to conduct a virtual meeting. We've been pretty successful in doing that. As Jeff mentioned earlier, this virtual meeting situation, I don't think is going to go away. I think it's very functional. I think it's very convenient. I also think it's much more effective sometimes to have virtual board meetings than it is to have board meetings in person.
Look, it's not just, we have a lot of cams here today, even for continuing education, for instance, all right? An hour to drive to the classroom, then 2 hours, 3 hours in the class, and an hour to drive back. Half your day's gone. It's not that we want to get rid of, you can't substitute for in person, and that's not going anywhere. And hopefully we start to do more of that. But the point is, this is not going anywhere. I think we're heading into a direction where it's going to be a hybrid situation.
And I agree, Jeff. And I'm not going to predict what's going to happen.
Right.
I think we're going to see less in-person activities and more virtual. They're very effective. Also, because of what I'm talking about here, I had a couple of questions. One was about the elevator generator requirement for elevators. That's not in 718. That's in the Florida Building Code. And I will make that information available to you before we leave today. I'll have to look it up, but it's off the top of my mind, but I'll get that for you at the very end before we leave as well. Also, there was a question about the board's emergency powers. Does that mean that the manager is automatically in charge? And I want to say, no, that does not mean the manager is automatically in charge. That means that the board can delegate to whoever's remaining on the property, whatever powers are necessary to take care of the association. Now, I want to emphasize here, when this was passed back in 2008, it was specifically directed at hurricanes. And what do we do after a hurricane, particularly where we have a board that's absent? And how do we do what's necessary to recover the property, mitigate damage, whatever it might be? And basically, it said the board could designate that authority to anybody. The board can do this collectively in a virtual meeting, whatever. They can appoint the manager as the body in charge. I recommend that we don't have maybe a resolution perhaps that says this is going to happen, but in the event that we need to do that, have the board actually physically, or not physically, but virtually, whatever it might be, get together and say, okay, we want these people in charge, and here's what your line of contact is. If you need to do anything, contact me or this one or that, whatever it might be. But establish a policy there to react to that emergency as well. Again, like I said, it's not automatic. It does need to be done by the board in a proactive manner. And that can be done in advance as well. And that goes back to the planning process, and particularly where you have absentee owners where there are a lot of snowbirds. The board's away during the summertime. I know some associations don't even have board meetings in the summer at all. But if you do have that situation, the board could put a resolution in place that says, in the event of a state of emergency, here is what happens. And we're going to delegate to the manager this responsibility to take care of the property, whatever. It also says you can cancel, reschedule meetings, or conduct meetings and whatever means is necessary. All that is, again, in the board's emergency powers section of the law. I recommend, if you're a manager of an association, that you should have a copy of that section of 718 somewhere in your files that you can call it out, basically refer to it in that situation, send it to the board and say, here, this is what's happening now, so that you can have that on hand. But anyway, those are things that you can do. Again, that's part of the planning process as well. Also, one of the things you need to do is have contact information for your team. Your team is probably going to evacuate as well. Hopefully, if we don't get in a situation like that, but it does. But how do you contact them and how do you recover? We got to give them instructions to come back to restore the property, all that as well. And then have a team plan as well and recognize the team. Training the team, we're going to recover all the emergency exits, entrances, identify that for everybody. Also, recognize where the stairwells, fire exits are. Also train the team about elevators. How do we operate the elevator, turn it off? Also, I got one of the questions I have from submitted with registration was, what happens with the elevators, all of your utilities, for example? If you have an evacuation in order, typically one of the responses to evacuation order is to shut the building down. And the question is, when do you do that? And what happens if you have people who stay in the building? Well, you're going to give them a notice that you're shutting down the building. If they elect to stay, then they stay at their option and also their peril. And that's spelled out in the emergency orders, the board's emergency powers orders as well. If people stay, the board's not responsible for their health care, their well-being.
Fred, does the same hold true? What if you're in a building in an evacuation zone, like east of the Intracoastal Waterway, for instance, and you're in an evacuation zone and you have to get out and you choose not to get out? Does it put the board in any kind of jeopardy, or is it just on the individual not disobeying the city ordinance?
That does not put the board on any jeopardy at all.
Okay.
No responsibility. If the board says we have an evacuation order, we're leaving, we suggest you do too. If somebody elects not to, that's their responsibility. And it's their peril. If they suffer harm or damage, that's their problem. Also, the board's not responsible. If the board, for example, shuts down the elevators, power, the water, everything like that, then that's their problem as well. It's just like, It's the same issue if I'm a single family homeowner. If a hurricane comes through, as Irma did in our area in 2017, and we lost power. Do I call to the city of Howey and say, you're responsible for my power? I elected to stay. It's my problem. Same thing applies in that situation as well. So it's not the board's responsibility. And the board's emergency power section specifically states that if an evacuation order comes, an owner elects not to evacuate, that's their problem. We had another comment from a participant that suggested if a person elects not to evacuate, request contact information for their next of kin, and provide that so that if something happens to them, they can notify those people as well. That's a rather drastic measure, but it's funny. I had that happen to somebody. Somebody was in a building and they were instructed by local law enforcement to evacuate. And they said, I'm not evacuating. And the law enforcement officer said, please provide me with your phone number and phone number of your next of kin. And the person said, what do you mean? He said, well, we have to contact somebody if something happens to you. Yeah. So it's unusual to do that. If they elect not to do that, again, that's no problem for us. It's not our responsibility.
Okay.
That is something that you may want to take a note of as well. And those are kind of issues that we run into, and try to use your best judgment, business judgment there as well, on how to handle that. I also recognize telephone equipment. Some people don't have landlines anymore, but even in the hurricanes, we may lose towers. Also, one of the problems with mobile phones is being able to charge them. If we have a power outage, we need to have some sort of charging available to us, either an automobile charge or something like that as well. And I know a lot of people have, it's kind of funny, we did this in our home. I bought a regular old rotary dial phone, which I can plug into my landline, which I still have now. I took it out and put it back in.
You're the one. You're the one.
Yep. I can have a phone if I need to, and it's not electric, it's not powered. I don't have to plug it in. It's just plugged into the system there as well. All that's there, but you need to make sure you have contact information. You also basically inventory, check your emergency life safety equipment, make sure that it's working, all that's in place there. Too often we don't check things until we need them. We find out they don't work. Things like flashlights, batteries for flashlights, all those kind of things. Also matches, you want to keep those available. Check your mechanical equipment, if you got furnaces, you got centralized heat and air, those kind of things. Monitor your fire extinguishers, make sure your fire alarm system is working. Make sure your shutoffs are functioning as well. Yeah. Those are things that you need to address in your checklist, and looking at all that as well. Also, you want to have practice. Drills and evaluations with your staff. Check your communications equipment. Most of us do now use mobile phones, cell phones, whatever. Again, make sure they're fully charged. We also have all the contact information on there as well. And the problem with cell phones is obviously they're powered. If you don't keep the charge, you're not gonna be able to access their information. Also, the cell companies lose towers, and we might lose the ability to communicate with those as well. But anyway, those are issues you want to address from communications.
We have a participant who wrote in that we use, and I'm glad he brought this up because I'm not sure where he lives, but I'm about to mention something that may resonate with this gentleman. We use portable CB radios for communications if necessary for emergency team and manager. And I was part of a team of a very large condominium community in Coconut Creek that did that, where they have an actual CB ham radio club. And there were about 144 buildings in this community, amongst 44 different associations. And there would be a building monitor. Each building monitor would be responsible for getting CB radios to designated people in his or her areas, in his or her association, sub-associations. And it was quite a thing. We were even covered by the Sun Sentinel and the local papers about how simple yet kind of an oxymoron, elaborate yet simple, but it was a very simple process, seemed elaborate, but it was a great fail-safe should phone signals die or cell signals die, and you just plug in the CB to your car, and you can use your car battery, an antenna with a magnet on the back of your car, and boom, you're able to communicate and get a fire truck there if you need it, that kind of a thing, plus communicating with your on-site staff. So I don't know if this person is within that community in Coconut Creek that I mentioned, but if you are, I miss you. Back to you, Fred.
Okay, now that's a very good point. The CB radios are very beneficial and very easy to work with, as Jeff described all that as well. One of our other participants also mentioned the concept of a crash cart, and a cart located in their facility with all these emergency supplies, and somebody's designated responsibility periodically during the year to check batteries, make sure everything works. Available, have them at various locations throughout the building. That's part of the preparation. All that goes into getting preparation for getting ready for the hurricanes, the storms. I always have said you can't over prepare. As at the end of my program today, there's a little statement that I learned in a long, long time ago in platoon leader school, and it said, "Hope for the best, prepare for the worst." And you should always be planning for the worst things to happen and be prepared for that. That way, if anything does happen, you're able to address it as well. And that goes back to your accessibility to all your equipment. Have your crash carts available somewhere where you can get to them. Make sure everybody knows. Make sure that everybody knows that where the all supplies and equipment are as well, particularly your team, and go through drills and evaluations on that as well. We had another question or comment about getting information out to, I presume, the residents. Can the CAM or the board or management have a social event with refreshments or whatever to try to get residents to come show up at a meeting to prepare them for, say, the hurricane or emergency, whatever they should do as well. The question comes up quite often with those kind of events. If it's a condominium association, the condominium statute is fairly specific with regard to what can be a common expense. And basically it says a common expense has to be related to the operation of the association, maintenance of the common property, or replacement of the common property, whatever it might be as well. And there's always been questions about social events. Can the association provide, quote, social activities? For example, holiday parties. And my answer has always been no. However, if you want to get volunteers to contribute some money to pay for refreshments to get people to come, it's ironic that you got to have refreshments to get people to come to an event like that. Social event, a town hall, whatever you want to call it, hurricane preparation party, whatever you want to call it. Yes, you can do that. And again, I don't know how, it depends on your community, how your people participate. Some show up, others don't. But anyway, that's something that you have to talk with the board about. But I basically say, I don't think that could be in a condominium particularly. I don't think that could be a common expense, but it could be something that people could contribute to try to entice people to come to a meeting to talk about hurricane preparation. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people out there who don't feel they need that information. They think they know it all anyway, so they're not going to participate. But anything that you can do to get owners to come, one of the things that I've observed over the past 40 years here, we have a lot of people who come to Florida from other areas of the country who have never experienced a hurricane. And they've experienced big thunderstorms, rains, flood, snow, but there's pretty much nothing more frightening than 100-mile-an-hour winds blowing through over your house and your windows. And that is
for hours.
Yes, for hours. And it's something that people don't really have any experience with. And it's not something that I would recommend that you want to go through. And it's something, it's education. You have to educate the people as well. And anything you can do to make them come to a meeting is certainly fair game. And I would certainly recommend you should do that as well. But identifying all the equipment, everything as well. Also, in the event of emergency, we have to have a process for activating your team. And anytime you're in an area where you have a hurricane warning, that team should be activated. Hurricane warning means there's a good chance it's coming where you are. Hurricane watch, it means we're watching it. Warning says it's possibly coming to you. That's the time to activate. Also monitor your local government. The state of Florida has a very active and responsive emergency preparation department. We'll give you their information at the end of our discussions here today, but that should all be ready as well. Jeff's holding up his phone here. NOAA, National Oceanic and Aeronautic Administration, has several apps you can put on your phone. Has weather notifications, hurricane notifications, hurricane maps, all that kind of stuff as well.
Yep.
Jeff,
yeah, when I'm not in South Florida, some of you know this, but when I'm not in Fred's neck of the woods, I go back and forth. I'm in the Birmingham, Alabama area, so we're in tornado country over here. So I get weather notifications if there's a tornado warning or a watch, and as Fred said, a watch means conditions are favorable, so be on the alert. A warning means it's coming, so, or it's close by, or it's happened.
Yep. And those are things that we need to monitor constantly. And I can't say enough, almost all of our counties now have emergency response teams, and they're constantly broadcasting information. The state of Florida has that information as well. Anything that you can put on your mobile communication device, have that available as well. Communicate with your team and respond to them as well. Have them respond to you and monitor their activities. Also recognize if you've got an emergency response team and the hurricane is imminent and it's coming to your area, you're most likely going to get an evacuation order, particularly if you're on the coastline, because that's where they most often hit with their full intensity. And that's where you'll get the evacuation orders because of the storm surge and everything else.
Yeah, flooding is what gets most people. It's not so much the wind or lightning. It's usually flooding and
flooding,
sinkholes, that kind of thing.
The surge, the storm surge.
Yeah.
That's what causes the most damage. Going back to Katrina back in 95, that was totally storm surge that caused almost all the damage throughout New Orleans, Mississippi as well, and Alabama also. But that's a big critical problem. And when we say evacuate, recognize that the response team is going to evacuate as well. When I know from my perspective as a manager, if my local government says evacuate, I'm leaving. And I'm going to have an evacuation plan in place before. And I'm not going to wait until 24 hours before. I'm getting out as soon as it comes out.
You know, Fred, what many folks don't realize, and even if they do, it's a good reminder that when the winds reach a certain speed, when it gets to a certain level, emergency vehicles are not going to respond. And that's a big part of the reason why evacuation and taking heed of evacuation orders are so important. Because I think once it gets above, I think it's above tropical storm force winds. I think that's when the emergency vehicles do not respond. Correct? Isn't it? It's tropical. Yeah.
Yes. I also recognize, and this is something that a lot of people don't quite grasp. Florida has very, very limited evacuation options.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're evacuating in Florida, the best option is go straight to the center of the state.
Yeah, it's so flat. You have no choice. I mean, over where I am now in the Alabama and Birmingham area, we have hills and inland areas. Y'all don't have that down there.
No. And what happens is everybody gets
and basements. We have basements. You don't.
Everybody in Florida gets on the turnpike and I-75 and I-95 and tries to head out. So you got 10 million people trying to leave South Florida, all go the same direction. Guess what? It doesn't work that way. I'll give you a personal experience. We had one of our employees was in Miami doing a program when Hurricane Andrew hit back in 1992. 92. And she was there, and I finally got in touch with her, and I said, "You need to leave." So she said, "Okay." And it was 2 days before the class was supposed to occur. I said, "Get out of there." And so her her brother and his family lived there as well, and they loaded up. They were going to come to our house in Central Florida to evacuate.
That's good. That's a dedicated employee, but get the hell out of there.
No, it took 2.5 days for
Yeah.
them to get there. Now that was 1992. Think about today, the population.
Yeah.
So if you're going to evacuate, start early. There is no evacuation an hour before the storm comes, because you're not going to get out at that point in time.
Right.
So properly planning for that as well. And as I said, north and south doesn't work in Florida. Even if you go to the center of the state, if the hurricane does come, it's going to be less intense because it's mostly worn out. My experience most recently was Hurricane Irma. It came ashore down in the Naples, Fort Myers area, and it came right over us the next day. It was still barely hurricane force winds, but there was nowhere for me to go. They evacuate, so shelter in place in that case. But anyway, they had to be prepared for all that as well.
Yeah.
But anyway, there are basically 5 processes for getting ready for a hurricane. You're going to secure your property, secure all the physical property itself, anything that's outside, furnishings, anything like that, put it away, get it down. Don't leave anything loose. Inspect your property, make sure there's no loose items anywhere. Clean as much as you can, debris. Don't leave anything in the open. Remove everything you can. If you can, cover your openings. Many of us now have hurricane shutters, hurricane protection. Those are the kind of things you need to get prepared for as well. Covering the openings. One of the questions we got earlier in the registrations was, what about the owners? Personal property on their patio or balcony. They've left their outdoor furniture there, they're away. I'm going to give you a recommendation here, and this is going to be difficult to enforce, but I would ask all of our owners in a condo or cooperative specifically, if you're going to be away from your unit for any lengthy period of time between June 1 and November 30th, put your outdoor furniture inside. Do not leave it on your patio or balcony. That way, the association is not going to try to remove it or be responsible for it. It's also not going to become debris, windborne debris, which quite likely could happen.
If
they leave it outside, we're not responsible for putting it inside.
So, Fred, what I was going to say is, if, let's say in a condo, it needs to update their governing doc, they need to contact their association attorney because they need to update their governing docs because it's antiquated. It's, it was done by the developer. They need to update it. Is that something they can put in their docs? Can they put in there that if you're gone between X time and X time, it is now in our rules and regs or in our docs that you have to bring the furniture in? Is that something they can put in there?
Well, using my non-legal opinion, yes.
Okay.
The courts have held that the documents are the governing documents of a community association, condo, cooperative, HOA, are documents that are enforceable. And you can do anything in there as long as it's agreed to by the requisite number of people as specified in those documents or by the statute. So, for example, if you have a declaration, this would be something that would be in the declaration. It has to do with the property.
Not unlike the rules, it wouldn't be enforceable in the rules and regs, right?
No, it would not be enforceable as a board rule and regulation.
Okay.
This would be a property right. Okay. So this would need to be in the declaration of condominium or a declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions, or if it's a co-op, it would be in the proprietary lease. But an amendment that says if you're gone, if you're not present in your property between, I'm going to use the hurricane season dates, June 1 and November 30th, you must remove everything from your property.
Check out this question. We have a good question.
Yeah. You must remove all your property from your patio or your balcony, whatever it might be. I saw the question as well, and let me go back and express something here that, again, crossing over to that legal world, but I'm expressing what I'm told by my friends in the legal world. Board rules and regulations. You have to be very careful with board rules and regulations. The board can't pass a rule that is enforceable that tells an owner what they can and can't do with their property, their unit itself. So I would say if the board can't pass a rule that says if an owner leaves property on his balcony, the board's going to put it somewhere, secure it, and charge him for that. That would not, in my opinion, be an enforceable rule.
Yeah.
Now, you could amend your documents to say that.
Which we just mentioned, right?
You could amend your declaration to state that. I think a better amendment would be to specify if you leave your unit between June 1 and November 30th, everything has to be secure inside or stored somewhere.
Okay.
Be a more proper approach, I think, than that as well. Also, we get questions about sometimes, and this is going back covering openings. What if an owner has hurricane shutters and the shutters are currently up and there's a storm coming and the owner is in New York for the summer? Can the association automatically go and close the shutters? And the answer is they're not obligated to. They need to get permission from the owner to do that. And then if they get permission from the owner, then the association is not responsible if there's a fault to the shutters or something doesn't work right or whatever that might be as well. Again, this is something if your building has hurricane shutters, either installed by the owners or installed by the association itself under the maintenance provisions of the Condominium Act, have the specified in the declaration how the shutters will be handled in the event of emergency, whatever it might be. Again, do it in the recorded documents. That way there's no question about whether it's enforceable or not. That also doesn't jeopardize the board for their actions as well, doing that as well.
Good explanation. Thank you.
And moving on here, every association should have an emergency procedures manual, including hurricanes here, spelling out how to prepare for the emergency. And this should actually be a book. If you want to use a book, you can, or a computer file, whatever. There's any number of examples of this available on the internet. Both FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, the Florida Emergency Management Division have examples of this as well. There should be some book that has all this in it. How to prepare for an emergency, in this case, a hurricane, how to react during the emergency. For example, hurricane, spell out when the evacuation, if the evacuation order comes in, when we're going to leave. Well, what do we do after the property, after the storm is left? How do we save lives? How do we make property more secure? Go through the process of securing outdoor furniture, shutter operation, all of those things as well, and spelled out in the manual. Have reference information in there as well. Those would be things like equipment operations, manuals, all of that especially as well. Your furnishings rather, your for shutters if the association is responsible to handling the shutters. Also have your emergency management team spelled out as well. Also directions for your building residents. What do they do in the event of a hurricane? What should they do as well? And again, I will put a notation in there if an evacuation order is issued and owner elects not to evacuate, notify them what's going to happen to the building. For example, we're going to shut down the power, the water, the elevators, and then they're at their own peril if something happens as well. Also in your manual, you want a description of the building. You want to have all the building's features in there as well. System information, mechanical equipment, shut-off valves as well in your book. Floors, plans, blueprints, as we talked about earlier. If those are accessible to you, have those available as well. You want an update list of all your location residents, their special needs, et cetera, we talked about earlier. Also, all your insurance information, your agent's name, your types of insurance, name of carrier, all this should be carried on your little, your removable disk as well, and a thumb drive. Keep all the information there, scan that, keep it with you as well. Also have a list of hazardous materials on your property. If you have a pool with chlorine, for example, note that as well. So you can have uh, information about that if you need to. You look at phone numbers, contact information for both your residents, also contractors, emergency information people, your police department, fire department, the paramedics, emergency team members as well. Also, weather information we talked about earlier. Today's world, you can have all the information available on your mobile device. Also, NOAA has a emergency radio that they sell very cheaply. It's rechargeable, has batteries, and that's in the event you lose your mobile device or power as well. And they're constantly broadcasting weather information on that as well, and all the emergency information as well. And also maintain the weather information we said, all that is available on your app or your apps. Also maintain your residence information and have that available in case you need it. Also recognize much of that information on your residence is not available to other people. So the only information that you want to make available to other people are, for example, phone numbers or email addresses or addresses of the owners used to provide notice. Under the statute or the documents themselves, other information is not available to other owners as part of the process, so we don't want to publish that. Anything that we don't have as well. Also maintain your insurance agent information as part of your records. Also have your hospital information, emergency contact information. Also have a network of your buildings, neighboring buildings, contact information with your other managers, fellow managers, all that as well. Maintain your utility companies, also all of your contractors, not just electricians, but your lawn people, your recovery people, also debris removal people, your local government's phone numbers, back up, as well. Plumbers, elevator service contractors, security services, glass company, disaster restoration firms, equipment rental companies, all that available before the disaster occurs. So you have that information you needed. And as Jeff mentioned earlier, part of this process is get to know these people. Don't wait until you need their services to find out about them. Talk to them, interview them, get their information, let them know who you are, have that information on file so that they know you if something happens. You may also want to have nearby hotels, maybe motels available for you as well. Also, you want to have somebody in charge of handling media requests. Now, with today's media, immediately before, during, and after the storm, we have everybody there from all the weather channels and news channels, and they're all wandering around trying to find people to talk to. So you want to make sure you have somebody designated in your, in your communities.
Salud.
That you can provide information to, and also the information you're going to provide as well. And we don't want to tell anybody anything more than we need to tell them. You may also want to know about buildings with vacant space for storage or whatever, in case your building's damaged, storage facilities, things like that. Any service organizations, churches should have all that in our package as well. And just basically a good summary there. Anyone who can provide special assistance during or after the emergency.
Yeah.
We also want to maintain a detailed description of the emergency, management team duties during the emergency, a flow chart of the chain of command during the emergency, handling media, emergency public address announcements should the residents need that as well. Procedures to account for all employees and residents as well, part of the management question as well.
And while Fred's getting to the next slide, I just want to mention that we have in the chat area, we just put the link if you wish to download the slides that Fred is going through today. And as I mentioned earlier, that same link will also appear in the follow-up email that you'll receive tomorrow. Fred, back to you. I see we have another question up there.
Somebody had a comment. The Convention Bureau people, good people to know about too as well, because they'll know about evacuation centers, gathering centers in addition to hotels and restaurants. Sometimes hotels and restaurants are available because they've been affected by the storm as well. Any place people can gather, where we have the emergency evacuation centers where those are available. All those are good points of information that you can do as well.
Yeah.
Also, you need to have a procedure for evacuating your disabled or elderly folks as well. Also, spell out procedures for allowing people to re-enter the buildings. One of the things in the emergency order section of the law allows you to do is determine when people can re-enter. You can stop them from re-entering if you don't have good engineering information, for example, and we don't want anybody entering the building until we're pretty sure it's safe and secure. But anyway, the emergency orders provision lets you do that as well.
Fred, real quick, we have a question on there about a sample hurricane manual. Earlier in this presentation today, you mentioned that FEMA has something on their website. I'm going to place that link into the chat area. Is that okay?
Yep. I also have the link at the end here as well.
Okay, cool.
There are two excellent sites for emergency information. FEMA is one. Also, the Florida Division of Emergency Management is one. And before we did this program, I went back to their websites and got a lot of information from their websites as well, and putting this information here. And they have actual samples of manuals. The information that I have in our presentation here actually comes from most of that information from their manuals as well. And if you follow through with that, it's pretty simple to do that. Maybe next. Also, you want drawings in your building showing all exits, entries and exits. We talked about plans and specifications. You want to have evacuation safety procedures. Also, prevention of theft and assault. Sometimes we're subject to people trying to come into the property after the fact, checking out what's available. We want to make sure we can provide security as much as we can, so we don't have people doing that as well. And you want 24 contact information for your management and staff. Safety features also in your emergency manual. We talked about telephone numbers, all your local emergency telephone numbers, your safety precautions action take. We have all sorts of emergencies here, but that's for all types of situations as well. And these are the two resources that I use. The Florida Division of Emergency Services, that's at floridadisaster.org. I have excellent resources there. FEMA, they have a hurricane page on FEMA. That's FEMA.gov. If you go there, you go to the hurricane page. They have extensive amounts of information in preparing for and recovering from a hurricane. And that has expanded so much over the years. It's been pretty much my go-to source for all the information that I provide in this discussion. And as Jeff said, he's going to give you those links as well. And this has been a very brief overview of this whole process. And I think what I mentioned earlier, the opening part of our discussions here, implementing the management process, PODC, as one of the excellent tools to use in preparing for a hurricane or any disaster as far as that goes. And it says there, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. If you do that, you're always going to be a successful manager in that regard. And I hope none of that ever happens, but that's what we have to plan for. That's what management does as well. And if you want to contact us, my email address is on the screen here, our phone number as well. That will also be available in this package if you request it from Jeff. I'm also available by email. My email is really simple. It's fgray@graysystems.com. And we're always here to help you any way we can. And with that, I'm going to stop my presentation, and I'll be available if anybody wants to ask questions, follow-up comments, whatever. We've got about 10 minutes left in our schedule time, and I'll be happy to address any question you might have about this topic or anything else you might have as well.
Yeah, you could use the raise your hand feature, and we can enable your microphones, and you can ask Fred your questions. And Fred, that was very, very enlightening and a great refresher material For those of us who may have been aware of some of it before, it never gets old. And after several years of not much activity, it's easy to get complacent. Now, how would you recommend? How would you recommend, or anybody out there, if you want to chime in, either type in or raise your hand? What do you think? How do you combat complacency amongst society? How do you combat? We live in Florida, hurricanes, dime a dozen. We don't have to worry about it. They talk about it on the news all the time, and it misses us every single time. How do you combat that and other complacency when it comes to natural disasters?
Well, there's any number of videos available.
Like what can a CAM do to combat that? Maybe, like you said, provide videos, encourage them to come to courses like sessions like this and listen.
Right. And there was nothing more dramatic to me than watching the effects of Hurricane Irma when it hit Naples and Fort Myers 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 4 years ago now. Also, when Hurricane Michael came ashore in Panama City, unfortunately, they didn't have enough coverage in Mexico Beach. Where I grew up in North Florida, Mexico Beach was my beach, where I went back in the 50s and 60s as a child. That place was totally destroyed. And to see the aftermath there is just astounding. Also, any visuals that you can give of that. And I go back all the way back to Hurricane Andrew.
Bingo. Somebody just mentioned, just quick interjection, post photos from recent storms, for instance, Hurricane Michael in the Panhandle, that may shake them awake. Strengthening your point.
And there are available, I don't have them right in front of me. After Hurricane Andrew came through in 1992, the state got involved, and they were alarmed about the extent of the damage, and the governor appointed a disaster review committee. I forgot what it was called. Anyway, I was appointed to that committee, and we got to go down and actually see the aftermath of Hurricane Andrew weeks after it. And I was never so astounded in my life as to what happened there. And we were so fortunate. It was just a small stretch of area that was damaged. And so fortunately, we had so few fatalities as well. Just a huge economic destruction. And when you see that, it's not a matter of if, it's when. It's going to happen again. The thing that has me most concerned is, as I said, I grew up in Florida. I go all the way back. I think my first recollection of a hurricane was 62 or 64, something like that, a Hurricane Donna. And it hit the east coast of Florida. There was a lot of damage. I lived in Northwest Florida. We didn't get anything. We had a little bit of rain, wind, that was it. That was my idea of a hurricane.
Yeah.
But after seeing Andrew, it woke me up. And then after experiencing Irma and two others, not Irma, but Charlie and two others in 2004.
Wilma. Yeah, I remember Wilma.
2017. And I am now a hurricane fanatic. Everything, when it happens, I'm ready.
Yeah. When Jim Cantore from the Weather Channel, if he's in your town, go the other way. Yeah, but somebody typed in, since Irma, we have put up poster boards of photos from Irma and hold a hurricane prep seminar. After that, we hand out the disaster prep plan. So that's a great plan, Joyce. Thanks for that tip.
That's wonderful information. Anything you do like that, you're right. Just so many people get complacent. The other thing is, so many new people moving to Florida have never experienced this. They've seen it on TV, but seeing it on TV is not like being there. And it's like you mentioned Jim Cantore being a hurricane magnet. I never want to be where he is. And I'm going to give you a little humor here. In 2014, Hurricane Charlie, as I said, that was my first full exposure personally to a hurricane. But anyway, my daughter and son-in-law at that time when Charlie was coming were visiting friends in Clearwater. And Charlie was coming up the coast on the West Coast, and it was projected to hit Tampa Bay area, which is Clearwater. So we reached out to them and said, you guys need to evacuate from out of there. So they came to our house. And guess what? 2 days later, Charlie came over to my house.
Followed him,
yeah. In 2017, my daughter and son-in-law now live in Key Largo, the upper part of the Keys. And of course, they got the evacuation order and they came to our house. And 2 days later, Irma came, and it came right over us again. And we had to breathe and everything. And so when they were getting ready to leave after a couple of days, they could finally go back to the Key Largo, I gathered my son-in-law aside and said, listen, I love you guys and all that. Next time you get an evacuation order, I said, go somewhere else. Don't come to Howie in the Hills. So they're like Jim Santori. But anything that you can do, anything that you can post, any pictures, anything like that, make these people aware. This is a dangerous situation. And it's physically dangerous, but more importantly, it's dangerous to the property. And if you don't properly take protective measures here, we're going to be a big problem with that as well. This is also something that affects insurance in Florida. I've heard the rumors we're going to be seeing some massive insurance premiums for property insurance again.
What else is new?
Mm-hmm. But anything you can do in that regard is.
I'll answer that one. Can you resend the link to the slides? I'll put the link in the chat, and the link will also be in an email that everybody who attended today will receive tomorrow at about 11 a.m. That link will be in there as well, but I'll put it into the chat in just a moment. Fred, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say the same thing that you posted again. The links for the FEMA and the Florida Division of Emergency Services.
Sure will.
Excellent resources for anything that you need to know about getting ready for a hurricane. And also Florida's Emergency Services Division, FEMA both, have excellent resources for any type of emergency preparation. Again, I can't stress enough from the management perspective, as managers, that's what we do. We plan, organize, direct, and control. If we're not doing that, we're not doing our job. And we should be, I always say this in class and people laugh at me. I said, managers solve problems. If you're not a manager, you're not solving problems.
Right.
If you're not solving problems, rather, you're not a manager. So if you don't have any problems, create some problems. That's what we create. I don't like to call them problems, but challenges. And we should always be striving to do something better. What can we do to improve activities? What can we do to better our association? What can we do to improve ourselves as well? And I said the biggest challenge is applying that PODC to yourself sometimes.
You know what I want to mention too, strengthening your point here. What are some of for those of you that are still with us, and thank you, there's still about 60 of you here, type in the Q&A function right now, if you would, what are some of the other items you would like to see, Fred, you'd like to see us cover on future editions of the gray area? Are there any other topics that you wish have been covered in the past? Maybe you have ongoing situations in your communities that you're either a board member of or that you manage that come up all the time and you're pulling your hair out, and I can't do that because I can't afford to pull any more hair out. So type in anything that you'd like to see us cover in future editions. And if you can't think of it right now, like Fred said, email him, email us, let us know what else you'd like to see us with future editions of the gray area.
That's a good point, Jeff. And we're open to just about anything. And I've always
that's a good one. Dealing with difficult members and owners. That's a good one. I know. Call Guido. No, kidding. You don't call Guido. We'll cover that one.
we will. I just want to mention real quickly. We do have a program called Dealing with Difficult People.
You do.
Continuing education package that promise you will be posted in the next week. We've been delaying on that for various reasons internally, but we'll be posting that as well.
Transitioning a self-managed board. This is some good stuff. Okay. Guidelines for when to get your attorney involved. Thanks for the feedback. This is good stuff because we can certainly bring these to you.
Definitely. Good points, good topics. Be happy to discuss those in future discussions as well. I want to mention one thing real quickly. Somebody manages the timeshare. And just a real quick comment about timeshare, if I may.
Okay.
Timeshare is governed by 721. That is true. But almost all the timeshares in Florida that were originally created back in the 70s, early 80s, and up until the mid 1990s used the condominium vehicle as their platform for ownership. So the timeshare, that's a condominium, is also regulated by 718. So it is under 718. If it's a timeshare, the Timeshare Act 721 has one section in it, 721.13, that provides some different management standards for a timeshare than for a whole ownership condominium. And there are not that many differences. But that's where the 721 comes in. It actually has very little impact on the management of the timeshare. We should always defer to the Condominium Act if we are a condominium. As we've seen timeshare evolve today, the new timeshares that are coming out now are not ownership at all. Most of the new timeshare sales are what we call membership timeshares, where you buy points or memberships or whatever. Many of them using the Disney model, where we don't have the deeded ownership any longer. So those would not be covered by 718 and 721 only. A brief comment about timeshare.
Okay. Well, thanks for all of those comments and suggestions here. If anybody have anything they want to ask Fred verbally, go ahead and raise your hand. We have, well, you see, we're at that 90-minute mark, so we don't want to keep you longer than advertised. Fred, any parting words? And before you do that, thanks for all the comments and suggestions for future topics. We are going to record these and look at every single one of them. So thank you. Fred, parting words?
I want to say thank you for participating. I just know it's a pleasure to talk with everybody. And I really appreciate the participation we had and also the input and questions about the future roundtables. And we'll bring everything up. Jeff and I were talking earlier, and I think we're going to do this shortly. We're just going to have a roundtable for questions and answers. And I'll have it up for anything and see how that works out as well.
Yes, and for those of you who are CAMS and board members, spread the word. Tell them about the gray area. When you get the emails, please share it with them, because our goal here, we do want to have roundtables with a lot of you. We want to hear how you've handled situations. We want to hear suggestions and ideas that you thought of that may benefit another person in your very profession. So we're going to be bringing more of these as well. I see somebody saying, can the recording be emailed to me? The recording of this program, once we edit our little intro and outro, will be on the graysystems.com website at some point next week. So be sure to check the website. It will be online for on-demand viewing. So be sure to check graysystems.com.
And I want to say that, echo that, Jeff. I want to say thank you for the people that offer the great suggestions and their experiences. That's how we all learn. We all learn from sharing. And that's one of the things I said. Don't be hesitant to call on your neighboring managers, participate, network, find out what they're doing. That's how we grow and learn and share with everybody. That way everybody benefits. With that, I'm done. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Be safe out there. Get ready for hurricane season. Don't procrastinate. And again, this video will be on graysystems.com at some point next week. And the email tomorrow will have the link for the slides. For Fred Gray, this is Jeff Solomon saying thank you for joining us. Thanks for joining us for the gray area, and we'll see you next month.